guys, welcome back to Apple Seeds. This is Cale, farm manager. We're here in the high tunnel and we're gonna show you guys how to trellis your tomatoes today. So you can see our little bed of tomatoes right here. They're, almost a foot tall, 8 inches tall. You can see they're kind of standing up and doing well, but tomatoes are a vine, so they need some support. So we're going to build this trellising in between our T-posts here. This is a system that we've set up. It's called a Florida weave. It is how a lot of folks grow tomatoes in Florida, actually. That's where it got its name. So you just want to have your tomatoes spaced about 24 inches apart, and then I put a T-post between every 2 plants. And then what we use for trellising is this synthetic twine, because it's strong and it can hold the weight of the tomato plant and it won't rot. I've tried jute in the past and it looks great, but it just gets really super floppy and it doesn't really do the job. Just tie your twine. You want it to, you're gonna want your twine to go about 2/3 of the way up from the base of the plant. So I'm just gonna tie this to the T-post really tight. The key is to keep this stuff tight. So I've tied it to the outside of the T-post. Now we want to move the twine to the inside of the tomato plant, the outside of its neighbor, the inside of the next post. Then we wrap it really tightly a couple of times. So we end up on this side of the post. Again, opposite side of the tomato. So we call this the inside, the outside, the inside again. It's more important that the string be at the correct height of the plant as opposed to a consistent height throughout the bed. Again, outside of the post, inside of the plant, outside of the plant, inside of the post. We do this method because we grow so many tomato plants. If you're just growing 1 or 2 tomato plants at your house, I would recommend getting just a tomato cage. It's a lot easier. You can see how tight I'm keeping the string methodically as I move down the bed. It's always good too if you can somehow make sure your twine is right underneath this part of the tomato so it can support itself. Okay, now that we're at the end of the bed, we've wrapped our string again very tightly around the end post. Now we do the opposite. If you've done the math right and you've laid out your string right, you're going to come out with the string being on the opposite side of where you came in on the post, and you will go down the bed on the opposite side of the plant where you initially came through, like this, and it pulls it tight. If you've done this correctly, I do this about once a week. Your tomato plants will grow very quickly in the summer, obviously. And so at least once a week, holding on to the plant, holding it up, this really helps protect it in any wind that comes through. Or even better, once the tomatoes grow and are getting big, they get heavy. And so you want them to be elevated up off the ground. Huge vector for tomato disease is in the soil, so you want to keep the tomatoes up off of the ground. And this allows for wind flow through the tomato plant, so if the leaves get wet, if you're outside after a rain, the airflow through the leaves will help dry the inside of the plant, and the bugs prefer a cold and dark and wet area on the plants to live. So this is it's just better for the plant overall health of the plant. And you can see the fruit better. just easier to find the tomatoes to pick them. So we're at the end. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and hold this tight. Get my knife out. I'm going to cut a little section off here. Okay, and now pull this as tight as we can, just wrap it around the end of the post. And tie it to the last string that came back. And your tomatoes are trellised. So again, we do this about once a week. You can see how tight this is. See how tight the plant is in there? This is awesome. This is exactly what these guys need. You can actually prune your tomatoes, unlike a lot of other plants, and they will survive, and they actually thrive on being pruned. So we have these little leaves down here that are coming out really close to the ground. We actually buried the stalk of the tomato way over here and then buried it and had it come up. The deeper you bury your stalk, the more roots will come out and the more the plant will be able to absorb water. So that's why we have these leaves growing so close to the ground. Pruning tomatoes is pretty easy. One tip I want to give everybody is don't overdo it. Don't prune too much because you will hurt the plant. You want to leave enough green space on here for it to photosynthesize and do its thing. You want to get some alcohol, rubbing alcohol just at the store. And then I have a little blade from a box cutter and there's just a little cup right here. I pour the alcohol in the cup. And then we want to disinfect the blade in between every plant. I made the mistake one year of not doing that, and I spread diseases all throughout my plants because I did not disinfect in between the plants. So now that your blade is disinfected, you simply come down and you take out any limbs at the very bottom. So I'm going to take out this many, and one more. This will help the plant promote growth in the fruit as opposed to all of the leaves. A couple other things. See these little tiny leaves coming out right here? These are called suckers. You always want to pop those off. Pop that off. Look for these suckers in between the true leaves. So this is pretty good for the first time right here on this one. So now we've got our blade in here being disinfected. We come through, go to our next plant, to take several off. And the one little sucker, and that's probably good on that one. You want to do this about once a week. I always do it right after I trellis my tomatoes so that they're up off the ground. You never want to do this right before it rains. Again, one of the greatest vectors for disease in a tomato plant is the wet ground and stuff kind of splashing up from the ground. So you don't really want to do this. You don't want to prune your tomatoes and have these open wounds before it rains, just in case there is any disease in the ground that might splash back up. But these little scars right here will heal over fairly quickly, probably by the end of the day. If there's ever a limb that's like high up like this, that's like leaning down and touching the ground, you can also just take and cut part of the leaf off. You don't have to cut the entire thing. So anything that might touch the ground, I just go ahead and pop that off. That's look good. And then help it kind of stand up. Okay, disinfect. And just keep going. Another thing to think about is that these tomato varieties that we have chosen here are all indeterminate, which means they are vines that won't stop growing until they die in the cold or the frost. About every week they'll grow maybe a foot a week, so there'll be 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 more lines of trellising. Most likely these tomatoes will be so happy in this high tunnel they'll grow up to the 6 foot mark, 5 foot mark of the post, and they'll probably flop over. If you're lucky and you can keep them growing, they'll grow 10, 15 feet. You know, if the plants are healthy and the soil is nice. So we expect to get fruit off of these plants until the days get shorter and the nights get colder, well into October.